Chapter 12. The Legend of the Blue Phantom. 1965. It was the middle of the decade nicknamed the Swinging Sixties because of the large number of new playgrounds that were built around that time. As usual, Great Britain's most suave and famous secret agent, James James, was taking a long lunch. He sidled up to the bar at his favourite restaurant and beckoned the white-jacketed, brown-moustached barman over with a casual wave of his left eyebrow.
"Chocolate milkshake, please, Gaston," he drawled.
"Shaken or stirred, sir?"
asked Gaston. James James was thrown slightly by this, but he didn't let it show.
"Stirred, please,"
he demanded confidently. The barman turned his back for a moment, then presented to him a glass of milk with all the chocolate syrup sunk to the bottom. James James thought for a moment.
"Now shake it, please, Gaston," he demanded. "A chocolate milkshake. Stirred, then shaken."
Gaston poured the milkshake into a shaker and shook it, which, as the name milkshake implies, is what you're supposed to do. But the super spy failed to notice this, as his attention had been diverted by the woman next to him at the bar. She was wearing a long evening dress, even though it was only long lunchtime, and had wavy dark hair that hid half her face in exactly the way secret agents really like. The spy slid down the bar so he was a bit closer to her, stumbling slightly at the halfway point.
"Well, hello there. The name's James. James James," he oozed.
The woman turned to face him with a puzzled expression.
James, she queried.
"No, not James James. Just James James. But please,"
he raised his more powerful right eyebrow,
"don't let's be formal. Call me James."
"I'm Jane. Jane,"
said the woman, flicking her hair back over her shoulder like she was in a shampoo advert.
"Really?"
asked James James.
"No, not really. That would be ridiculous,"
she replied.
"Jane Smith."
James James had rather hoped her name would be something more like Squeezy O'Bottom. He was a big fan of a novelty name on a lady, but he didn't let his disappointment show. Instead, he took a long sip on his drink through a stripy straw. He gagged.
"Ugh! Gaston, this hot chocolate is stone cold."
"It's a milkshake, sir,"
replied Gaston coolly.
"And there's a telephone call for you."
He handed James James an old-fashioned black phone on a silver tray. Although the phone didn't look old-fashioned to any of them because it was the 1960s, they thought it looked really quite up-to-date, even though it was plugged into the wall with a wire, which made carting it around on a tray very inconvenient. James picked up the handset, thinking to himself how marvellous modern technology was.
"James?"
said a voice at the other end, which he recognized as M, the head of the Secret Service. It was short for Emma.
"Please, sir, there's no need to be so formal. Do call me James,"
began James James.
"Shut up and stop calling me sir,"
M snapped. She was in a rush and had no time to banter with idiots. Neither did Jane Smith, who took this opportunity to sneak away, and later enjoyed a long and successful career as an award-winning architect. But that's another, more architecture-based story.
"It's Dr. Nuke, James,"
continued M.
"He's planted a nuclear bomb underneath London, and he's threatening to detonate it unless we pay him 10 million guineas, 5 shillings and 7 pence halfpenny, and a farthing."
Money back then used to be more confusing.
"We've tracked him to the crypt at St. Paul's Cathedral. Hurry, James."
"Don't worry, sir. I'm on my way to save Great Britain,"
shouted James James into the phone unnecessarily loudly, causing some diners in the restaurant to look up irritably from their plates of boiled liver. Food back then wasn't great either. After only a 5-minute pause in which he tried to work out how much a farthing was worth, the world's greatest secret agent dashed out of the door and down the stairs to his car. He then dashed back up the stairs and picked up his car keys before dashing back down again, unlocking his car and getting in. Gaston finished off the milkshake. You may already know what St. Paul's Cathedral looks like. If you don't, then please draw a picture of what you imagine it might look like and send it to us. We could do with a laugh. In any case, whatever it looks like in your head, James pulled up outside it in his silver sports car and rushed to the door marked Crypt. There was a door next to it marked Toilet that he was quite tempted by after his long lunch, but there was no time. Save the world first, we later, thought James, remembering page 1 of the spy handbook. He eased open the first door and crept softly down the stairs like a stealthy panther wearing a suit because it was on its way to the Panther of the Year awards. At the bottom of the stairs, the secret agent eased open the door and slipped inside. He found himself in a large, chilly stone room. It was lit by gas lamps on the wall. Stone coffins were arranged in rows across the paved floor. Towards the center of the room was a large metal box, and a man with a bald head was standing at it with his back to James, fiddling with the controls. The spy grinned to himself. This was going to be easy. He stepped quietly forward and tripped over a large white cat that made a noise like a cat that had been tripped over. The bald man ceased his fiddling and spoke without turning round.
Ah, I've been expecting you.
Have you? Answered James before he could stop himself.
Yes, 1 margarita with extra cheese and garlic doughbars, 7 half-crowns and 4 tuppence shrapney, isn't it? I've got the money here somewhere.
He started to rummage in the pocket of his grey villain suit.
I'm not the pizza guy, Dr. Nuke. This is 1965.
The spy interrupted him.
It's me, James, the world's greatest secret agent, here to put a stop to your evil schemes.
Immediately, he regretted saying this. His cover was blown. Dr. Nuke slowly turned around. His face was marked by a hideous scar that ran from his left eye right the way down his cheek. He'd drawn it there in pen to look more dastardly.
Stop my evil schemes? I don't think so.
Dr. Nuke chuckled, and before James could move, he'd whipped out a gun and pointed it straight at James's handsome, chiseled face. There was a moment's silence, broken only by the distant sound of the cat limping around and saying bad words in cat language.
What happens now, then?
James wanted to know.
What do you mean, what happens now?
Snapped Dr. Nuke.
I'm going to shoot you in the face, then get on with my plan to blow up London with this nuclear bomb. What did you expect to happen?
Well, I thought there'd be dinner,
said the secret agent lamely.
Dinner?
Yes, usually villains give me dinner, you know? Then they tell me their evil plans and tie me up and leave me unguarded so I can escape using the butter knife I concealed in my sleeve during the cheese course.
Well,
chuckled Dr. Nuke.
Oh, jeez, Mr. James.
Which wasn't bad considering he thought of it on the spot. And he pulled the trigger. There was a bang and flash from the muzzle of the gun. But James was surprised and delighted to discover that he wasn't dead. The bullet seemed to have hit an invisible wall in the air halfway between the two men. It tinkled harmlessly to the ground.
Looks like it's hard cheese on you, Dr. Nuke,
drawled James. Then he squinted. He thought he could see some kind of disturbance in the space where the bullet had stopped. A bluish, person-shaped haze. It was see-through and indistinct.
That's my joke. You can't steal my lines and say them back at me,
raged Dr. Nuke.
Just for that, I'm going to blow up London anyway.
He turned back to his bomb, and on a control panel saying, blow up London, he flicked the switch to on. A display lit up, and numbers started counting down from 10. Dr. Nuke threw himself at James and knocked him over backwards. 9. The two men wrestled on the floor, making grunting noises. 8.
Your name's quite a coincidence, isn't it?
Mused James from the crook of Dr. Nuke's elbow. 7.
How do you mean?
Asked the supervillain, digging his knee into the spy's back. 6.
Well, you're called Dr. Nuke,
said James, hitting him over the head with a wooden chair.
And you try to blow things up with nuclear bombs.
5.
Do you know, I've never even thought of it like that,
said Dr. Nuke, leaping from the edge of the battle arena onto the secret agent's back and clinging on as he thrashed around. 4.
I mean, imagine if you'd been called Dr. Tortoise.
Laughed James, hooking his fingers into the doctor's nostrils. 3.
I'd never get anywhere fast, would I?
Guffawed Dr. Nuke. 2.
But instead,
Dr. Nuke went on.
I'm about to wipe out London with a huge, devastating explosion in about 1 second.
1. Click. Nothing exploded. Both men stopped their wrestle, which they had actually just been starting to really enjoy, got to their feet and turned to the bomb. The bluish outline of someone could now be seen beside the control panel, hand outstretched to the control switch, which had just been flicked to off. As they watched, the figure solidified into the shape of a person in a blue costume. Its face was hidden behind a silvery blue helmet, and its torso protected by armor in the same color.
That armor's bulletproof,
Realized James, and whistled in admiration.
and you can go invisible.
The helmeted figure nodded.
You got between me and the gun.
He marveled. The figure nodded silently once again, then looked sharply to the right. Dr. Nuke was making a run for the door. Like a total legend, the blue-clad hero leaped athletically over the nearest stone coffin, turned a perfect somersault in midair, and brought the bad guy to the ground with a flying scissor kick. Dr. Nuke's head hit the stone floor with an extremely satisfying noise, knocking him out cold. His silvery blue attacker, still crouched in a combat stance, looked back at James expectantly. Not sure what to do, the spy gave a thumbs-up sign and a slight nod, as if to say, well done on taking down Dr. Nuke with that awesome display of hand-to-hand combat, but I actually had the situation perfectly under control. The mysterious figure gestured impatiently to Dr. Nuke, who was now snoring like a drunken sea lion, then pointed towards the door that led to the stairs.
Ah, yes, quite right. Let's get him outside,
Said James.
It's time for Dr. Nuke to have a long piece of, doctor's surgery in prison.
He'd been trying for a pithy one-liner, but had fallen woefully short. Instead, he talked total gibberish for 2 precious seconds. His silvery blue rescuer indicated this with a pitying wiggle of the hands, then helped him carry the limp form of Dr. Nuke up the stairs. As they burst into the fresh air, James gasped. Parked beside his silver sports car was a vehicle that, quite frankly, made everything else within a 2-mile radius, including the cathedral, look rubbish. It was made of gleaming, polished chrome. Its long, delicately curved bonnet led up to an aeroplane-style cockpit. Behind that, stretching across the top of the fuselage and supported by metal struts, was a single silver wing. Huge, polished black tires shone at each corner, and on either side of it, just behind the doors, were 2 long, thin jet engines. James looked at his own car, of which he was unreasonably proud, and realized that compared to this vehicle, it might as well have been a cardboard box with "car" written on the side in crayon. The door of the beautiful contraption opened, and the silvery blue hero who had just rescued him from certain death darted over to it and disappeared inside. Just before the door closed, a gloved hand reached out and flicked out a small white card. With a roar, its jets started up, and the machine rose swiftly into the air. It hovered there for a moment, and then, just when you thought it couldn't get any more brilliant, the engines swiveled smoothly so they were pointing backwards, and the vehicle disappeared above the cathedral's roof, leaving a faint, curved vapor trail of different shades of blue in the cool, early evening air. James walked over to the scorched patch of road where the incredible vehicle had rested and picked up the card. As police sirens grew louder, he turned it over and read, in neat, sloping handwriting, "You just got saved by the Blue Phantom."